The waves kissed the shores of ancient Alexandria with the same rhythm they always had, but the city had changed. Its skyline was crowned not just with lighthouses and temples, but with the unmistakable domes and spires of the great library untouched by fire, preserved through wisdom, and protected by generations who understood its worth. In this version of history, the scrolls never burned, the knowledge never vanished, and the ancient world never forgot what it once knew. It began not with warriors, but with philosophers. When the first rumors of invasion spread across the Mediterranean, it was not generals who rallied to defend the library, but mathematicians, astronomers, translators, and priests. A secret order of guardians formed not in blood but in belief stood vigil over the gates. They used science to mislead armies, illusion to protect chambers, and diplomacy to bribe time. The library was not hidden, it was defended by making it indispensable. No empire could afford to destroy what it needed to conquer the world. And so, scrolls containing forgotten languages, ancient maps, and machines long ahead of their time remained safe. The works of Aristarchus, who proposed the heliocentric model long before Copernicus, continued to influence astronomy. The surgical treatises of Herophilos and Erasistratus redefined medicine. The lost mechanical designs of Archimedes were refined, built, and improved. Civilization did not slide into the long night of ignorance. It surged into a dawn that never dimmed. By the year 500 AD, the library was no longer just a place of study. It had become the nerve center of the world. Universities modeled after Alexandria sprouted in Athens, Carthage, and even the distant hills of Gaul. Steam engines, once only theoretical, powered early mills and ships. A proto-internet of letters delivered by vast relay systems connected distant thinkers from India to Iberia. Human flight had already been attempted in Persia. The word Dark Ages never entered the historical lexicon. Religions, too, transformed. With access to comparative theology, ancient texts, and records of oral traditions from across the world, spiritual leaders evolved. Instead of division, scholars found threads of unity. Similar parables in the Vedas and the Bible mirrored philosophies in Buddhism and Stoicism. Wars of faith still occurred, but were shorter, less catastrophic. In this world, belief had a library to answer to, a truth's repository that could not be twisted so easily. The concept of nation-states emerged earlier. Inventions like paper money, water-powered machinery, and urban sanitation had already spread by 800 AD. Governments became more bureaucratic, less feudal. Law codes were standardized across continents. Women, whose contributions had been preserved in texts from Sumeria, Egypt, and early Greek medicine, began entering scientific circles in greater numbers. A female astronomer from Alexandria discovered the moons of Jupiter 3 centuries before Galileo ever existed. And war. War became less romantic. The historical scrolls of brutality, first-hand accounts of invasions, diseases, and enslavement were not hidden but taught in public forums. The library ensured that the horrors of past empires were remembered in vivid, uncomfortable detail. Rulers who wanted glory found their lies unraveled in the pages of Alexandria. Knowledge had become a shield, a mirror, too honest to allow tyranny unchallenged. By the time the 12th century arrived, the world was connected by trade routes not only of goods, but of thought. Alexandria had built a second library in Chang'an, another in Timbuktu, and a floating archive that sailed the Indian Ocean. When the New World was contacted, not invaded, the encounter was one of mutual awe. The Mayan codices had already been translated in the Alexandria South Annex. No books were burned. Instead, knowledge flowed in both directions. Electricity came early, sparked not by accident, but by calculated study of ancient static devices recorded on Babylonian tablets. By 1300 AD, light danced in the streets of Constantinople. By 1350, a network of electric-powered communication towers allowed messages to cross continents in hours, not weeks. The Renaissance happened not as a rediscovery, but as a continuous, evolving enlightenment. Science fiction was born early too. Imagination, freed from the chains of forgotten knowledge, soared into tales of mechanical birds, undersea cities, and even space travel. A Turkish engineer wrote the first theoretical framework for a moon expedition in 1420. Rockets were tested by Mughal inventors in 1455. The term astronaut was coined in Latin and Sanskrit simultaneously. A joint expedition involving scientists from 5 empires landed a human crew on the moon by the 1600s. All this because one building, one archive, had survived. But it was not without its tensions. Power grew uneasy when knowledge became decentralized. Monarchs realized their lies had shorter lifespans. Conspiracies died in the face of open information. The people became harder to control, more demanding of transparency. The great library did not serve any king. It served truth, and truth had no master. So there were still attempts to control it. Censorship tried and failed. Fire threatened again and again. But the difference was that now the people knew. They remembered. They valued. The library had become a symbol not of stone and scroll, but of identity. Citizens saw themselves not as subjects, but as protectors of knowledge. Every city had its version of Alexandria local archive, where truth lived and the past breathed. In the modern era of this alternate world, technology surged faster than we could ever imagine. Diseases were eradicated centuries earlier. Combustion engine was replaced with magnetic levitation by the 1700s. Artificial intelligence was born in the 1800s, not as a curiosity, but as an assistant to the great data archivists of the global library network. And instead of fearing its rise, humanity welcomed it because their minds had already evolved with the access to centuries of uninterrupted knowledge. Education was not a privilege, it was oxygen. Children were taught not just to memorize, but to question. The Socratic method returned in full strength, spreading through schools like wildfire. Curiosity was worshipped, not feared. And the definition of civilized had shifted not based on conquest, but on contribution. Even wars, though never eliminated entirely, became rare. International courts formed in Alexandria's original chamber of ethics judged not with bias, but with algorithms based on thousands of years of legal precedent. Empires still clashed, but diplomacy backed by irrefutable historical reference usually won. The leaders rose not by charisma, but by accuracy. The best predictor of a ruler's future was how well they understood the past. And art bloomed. Because when you preserve every style, every school, every ancient epic, you build upon them instead of repeating. The painters of the 1900s blended Sumerian symbolism with quantum theory. Music fused African polyrhythms with Babylonian lyres. Theater explored simulations of Aristotle's lost comedies and Mayan hero journeys. Culture became not regional but planetary. The great library stood at the center of it all, its walls now encased in crystal, powered by solar mirrors and cooled by deep-sea systems. The Library of Alexandria had become more than a building. It was a mind of the human race. Every scroll had been digitized into quantum memory. Every visitor, upon entry, was greeted by a holographic scholar speaking in their native tongue. Language was no longer a barrier, misunderstanding no longer an excuse. And in this version of Earth, the stars were not distant. They were the next chapter. Because when knowledge is never lost, neither is the future.